Before the stars burned with human fire, before the galaxy learned to fear the word Earth, there was only silence, a silence so profound it swallowed empires whole. The celestial concordance ruled, not with armies but with the velvet glove of absolute order. For 10,000 cycles peace reigned. Not the peace of harmony, but the peace of the grave. And then we rose from our. The void between galaxies is not empty. It hums. A low, subsonic thrumming woven from the gravitational sighs of dead stars, the whisper of dark matter currents, and the cold metallic pulse of the Concordance's vast infrastructure. Here, on the ragged edge of known space, orbiting a dead star designated Sol 7 by the Concordance archives, hung the Eidolon. Not a ship, a tomb, a monument to extinction. Inside its obsidian shell, preserved in stasis fields colder than the void outside, lay the last remnants of Homo sapiens. Not warriors, not conquerors, refugees, scientists, engineers, poets, children, frozen in the final desperate act of a species that refused to let its story end in fire. They'd called it Project Lazarus. A gamble against cosmic oblivion. They'd won the gamble, only to wake into a universe that had already written their epitaph. Outside the Eidolon, the silence was broken. Not by sound, but by light. 3 sleek, obsidian vessels, shaped like predatory stingrays forged from night itself, slid from the quantum foam. The Cathar-class enforcers of the celestial concordance. Their hulls drank the faint starlight, radiating only the faintest thermal signature, a ghost fleet policing a ghost system. Aboard the lead enforcer, silent judgment. High Arbiter Valen stood before the main holotank. His form was tall, slender, encased in seamless pearlescent armor that shifted hue with his mood, currently a deep contemplative indigo. His face beneath the smooth, featureless visor of his helmet was a complex lattice of chitinous plates, capable of subtle shifts that conveyed emotion to his own kind. To human eyes, he was an impassive statue. To his subordinates, the slight inward curl of his primary sensory fronds spoke volumes, curiosity laced with profound unease. Kalen Vio, translated. The anomaly persists. Arbiter Kalen. Energy signatures consistent with pre-collapse Terran stasis technology, yet the source is impossible. Sol 7 was sterilized, scoured clean by the cleansing fire 300 cycles past. Nothing organic should remain, nothing. Kalen, his armor a stark, judgmental white, stood rigidly beside him. His fronds were held stiffly outward, a posture of rigid adherence to protocol, of unwavering certainty. Kalen Vo translated. Impossible is a human concept. Arbiter Valen. The concordance records are absolute. Sol 7 is a graveyard. This signal is a glitch, or a trap, a remnant of their chaotic defiance perhaps. We should purge it. Erase this. Echo. Valen's fronds twitched moanedly. Echo. The word hung in the sterile air of the command deck. He remembered the archival fragments, the frantic, fragmented transmissions from Sol in its final days. Not pleas for mercy, but declarations of intent. We will not go quietly. We will be the ember in the dark. Madness. Suicidal defiance against the overwhelming serene might of the concordance. And yet, here was the ember, flickering. The concordance didn't conquer. It assimilated. It offered order, longevity, the cessation of conflict. In return, individuality, passion. The messy, dangerous spark of uncontrolled ambition. For millennia, species joined willingly, seduced by the promise of an end to suffering. But humanity had spat in the face of that promise. They'd chosen fire over ice, chaos over order, and paid the ultimate price. Inside the Eidolon, deep within the cryo-vault, the stasis fields began to fail. Not catastrophically, but with the slow, inevitable decay of systems starved of power for centuries. Frost bloomed on the transparent lids of the cryopods. Inside one pod, labeled only with a faded, peeling sticker, depicting a crude drawing of a dog, a young woman's eyelids fluttered. Her name was Anya Petrova. She was 23 cycles old when the sky burned. She remembered the smell of ozone and burning plastic, the deafening roar of atmospheric re-entry shields failing, the crushing weight of despair as the last evacuation shuttle launched without her family. She'd volunteered for Lazarus, a final desperate hope. Her pod hissed open. Cold, stale air flooded her lungs. She gasped, a raw, ragged sound in the tomb-like silence. Her vision swam, then focused on the dim emergency lights casting long, skeletal shadows. Around her, hundreds of pods stood dark, silent, empty, or not. A low groan echoed from another pod nearby. Then another. The Lazarus protocol was activating, not all at once, but in waves, as power trickled through failing conduits. Anya stumbled out, her muscles screaming in protest. She found Commander Elias Vance slumped against a console, his face gaunt, eyes hollow with the weight of centuries and the crushing realization of what they'd awakened to. Vance had been the architect of Lazarus. He'd chosen who lived, who died in the final lottery. The guilt was a physical weight on his shoulders. Elias Vance, hoarse whisper. Inyat? Is it real? Enya Petrove, voice trembling. The stars, Commander. They're wrong. She pointed a shaking finger towards a viewport. Outside, the familiar constellations of Sol were gone, replaced by unfamiliar alien patterns. And hanging in the void, impossibly close, were the 3 obsidian stingrays. Silent, watching. They'd slept through the death of their world, woken to find the galaxy itself had moved on and left them behind, forgotten, erased. But the Concordance never forgets a threat, especially one that refused to stay dead. On the silent judgment, alarms chimed, a soft, melodic chime that to Kalen's ears screamed danger. Tech Priest VO translated, voice crackling with static. Arbiter, multiple biosignatures confirmed. Terran origin, they are active and broadcasting. A raw, unmodulated signal burst from the Eidolon, a simple, repeating pulse on an ancient Terran frequency. Not a message, a heartbeat, a declaration, we are here. Kalen's fronds snapped rigidly forward, his armor flushing crimson, a color of pure, unadulterated alarm. Containment breach. Activate null fields, prepare purification lances, they must. But Valen raised a single chitinous hand. His armor shifted to a deep, turbulent violet, the color of profound conflict. Hold, Kalen. His voice, transmitted through the ship's comms, was calm, but carried an undercurrent of something ancient, almost fearful. Observe. Record. Understand how they survived the cleansing fire. This changes everything. Valen saw not just survivors. He saw a ghost that had walked out of its own grave. And ghosts, in the sterile halls of the Concordance, were the stuff of nightmares. Nightmares that could shatter the perfect order. Inside the Eidolon, Vance stared at the alien ships on the tactical display, his mind racing. He recognized the design from fragmented pre-collapse intel, Concordance enforcers. The hand of the galaxy's silent ruler, hope, fragile as spun glass, warred with terror. They were outgunned, outmatched, adrift in time. But they were alive. And humanity, Vance knew with bone-deep certainty, did not go quietly. He activated the ship's external comm, his voice rough but steady, amplified to carry across the void. This is Commander Elias Vance of the Terran vessel Eidolon. We come in peace. We seek only to understand. The response was not words. It was light. Blinding, searing beams of coherent null energy lanced from the lead enforcer. Not at the Eidolon, but around it, weaving a cage of shimmering, destructive force. The air outside the viewport crackled with contained annihilation. Kalen VO, translated voice cold fury. Containment established. Arbiter Valen, they are caged. Now, we dissect the anomaly. Valen watched the tiny human ship dwarfed by the null field cage, a fly trapped in amber. His fronds curled inward again, tighter. This time. Dissection. Purification. The Concordance way. But the ghost in the machine, it felt different. Older. Hungrier. The cage was set. The observers became the observed. And deep within the Eidolon, amidst the groans of the newly awakened and the cold dread of the void, a different kind of fire began to stir. Not the fire of destruction that had consumed Sol, but the fire of resurrection, a fire the Concordance, in all its serene, ordered wisdom, had never truly understood. Anya found Vance at the main viewport, his reflection ghostly against the shimmering prison of light. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly strong. Anya Petrova. What do we do, Commander? Vance didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on the obsidian ships, on the cold, alien logic they represented. He thought of the children in the cryopods, the poets, the engineers, the future he'd gambled everything to preserve. He thought of the cleansing fire that had turned Earth to glass. Elias Vance, quietly, with terrifying resolve. We remind them why they were afraid of us the first time. Suddenly the Eidolon shuddered violently. Not from an external blow, but from within. A deep, resonant thrum vibrated through the deck plates, a sound that hadn't been heard in centuries. From the ship's core, long dormant systems flickered online. Power conduits, starved for so long, surged with a sudden desperate energy. On the bridge displays, a single archaic symbol flared to life, a stylized burning phoenix. The Lazarus Protocol wasn't just about waking the sleepers, it was about waking the ship. And the ship remembered how to fight. Alarms blared on the silent judgment. The tech priest's voice was shrill with panic. Tech priest, arbiter, the Terran vessel. Its core signature is spiking. Off the scale. It's generating a localized Chroniton surge. The null field, it's destabilizing. Kalen whirled on Valen, his crimson armor blazing. See? The chaos, the defiance, purge them now. Valen stared at the holotank. The tiny human ship was glowing with an internal light, pushing against the null field cage like a living thing straining against its bonds. The Chroniton readings were impossible. Temporal energy. The very fabric of causality bending around this relic. Velentheo, voice low, almost a whisper. No, Kalen, look closer, they're not attacking the field, they're rewinding it. On the display, the shimmering cage of null energy began to flicker, its destructive coherence unraveling, flowing backwards along its own energy pathways towards the enforcers that had created it. The Eidolon wasn't breaking out, it was unmaking its prison. The Concordance enforcers, masters of spatial manipulation and energy projection, had never encountered a weapon that manipulated time itself. Not as a bomb, but as a scalpel. A scalpel wielded by ghosts who refused to stay buried. The lead enforcer's silent judgment lurched as the destabilized null field energy, now flowing backwards, slammed into its own emitters. Sparks erupted across its obsidian hull. Warning klaxons, melodic yet urgent, filled its command deck. Kalen screaming. Shields, full reverse thrust, but it was too late. The Chroniton surge, focused and precise, didn't destroy the enforcer. It aged it. Centuries of wear and tear, normally mitigated by the Concordance's flawless maintenance fields, manifested instantly. Hull plating groaned, microfractures spiderwebbing across its surface. Critical systems flickered and died. The mighty stingray shuddered, its predatory grace replaced by the clumsy flailing of a dying beast. Inside the Eidolon, Vance gripped the console, veins standing out on his temples, sweat beaded on his forehead. The Chroniton drive was tearing him apart, channeling temporal energy through his own neural interface. He could feel the seconds, the minutes, the centuries slipping through his mind like sand. Elias Vance, gritting his teeth. Anya, get everyone to the escape pods. Now. This won't hold them long. Anya Petrova. Commander, you. Elias Vance, cutting her off, eyes blazing with desperate fire. Go. That's an order. Save them. Save the future. Anya hesitated for only a heartbeat, then turned, sprinting down the shuddering corridor, shouting orders, her voice cutting through the panic. Vance watched her go. A flicker of pride in his exhausted eyes, then he turned back to the viewport. to the crippled enforcer and its two still functional enraged companions. He poured every ounce of his will, every memory of Earth's burning sky, every hope for the children in the pods, into the Chroniton drive. He wasn't just fighting for escape. He was fighting for a message. A message written in the language of broken time and shattered order. A message the galaxy had forgotten, but would soon remember with terror. The two remaining enforcers opened fire. Not null fields this time. Pure, annihilating plasma. The beams, capable of vaporizing asteroids, lanced towards the Eidolon. Vance braced, ready to meet oblivion. But the beams missed, not by much. They seared past the Eidolon's hull, carving molten scars in the void. On the silent judgment, Kalen roared in frustration. Kalen, impossible. Targeting locks are perfect. Valen's fronds were pressed flat against his skull, his armor a stormy gray. He understood. Temporal displacement, he breathed. The words heavy with dawning horror. They're not where we see them. They're when we don't expect them to be. The Eidolon, riding the wave of its own Chroniton surge, existed for a fraction of a second outside linear time. Just enough to dodge annihilation. The ghost ship danced between the seconds, and the hunters were left grasping at shadows, with a final agonizing surge of power that made the Eidolon's lights dim to near darkness. Vance triggered the last of the Chroniton drive's reserves. Not to attack, to jump. A blind, desperate leap into the quantum foam, using the temporal distortion as a slingshot. The Eidolon vanished. Not with a flash, but with a sudden, chilling absence, as if it had never been there at all. Only the crippled silent judgment, drifting helplessly, and the two furious enforcers remained in the silent graveyard of soul. Kalen slammed a fist against the console. Track them! Find them! Valen stood utterly still, watching the empty space where the ghost had been. The Chroniton residue lingered, a faint ghostly echo in the sensors. It felt familiar, like the archival fragments of Sola's final moments, like the echo of a scream that had never truly faded. Velen? VOVL. Voice barely a whisper. We didn't just find survivors, Kalen. He turned, his featureless visor seeming to bore into the younger arbiter. We woke the nightmare, and the nightmare was just beginning its resurrection. They fled through the cracks in time. A ghost ship carrying ghosts. The Eidolon limped into the uncharted nebulae of the Perseus arm, its Chroniton drive, a burnt-out husk, its power reserves dwindling to critical. They were alive, but adrift in a galaxy that wanted them dead. And the Concordance? The Concordance does not forget. It calculates, it plans, it sends its hounds. The Eidolon drifted within the swirling ionized gases of the Veil Nebula, a cosmic shroud offering scant camouflage. Inside, the mood was grim. Of the 300 souls awakened by the Lazarus Protocol, only 212 remained. The Chroniton surge. The violent jump, the sheer trauma of awakening centuries too late, it had claimed its toll. The escape pods Anya had evacuated, carried the children, the most vulnerable, to a hidden cache on a barren moon deep within the nebula. A desperate gamble. A seed planted in the dark. Elias Vance was a ghost of his former self. The Chroniton backlash had left him gaunt, his eyes shadowed, his hands trembling with a constant low-level neural feedback. He moved through the ship like a wraith, haunted by the faces of those lost during the jump, by the crushing weight of leadership in a universe that offered no sanctuary. Anya Petrova, however, burned with a fierce protective energy. She'd taken command of the engineering and security teams, her pragmatism a stark contrast to Vance's brooding despair. She saw the fear in the eyes of the survivors, the way they flinched at every sensor ping, the way they whispered about the silent ones in the dark. She knew fear was a luxury they couldn't afford. Anya Petrova, to a group of engineers, voice sharp but not unkind. Scavenge the secondary life support. Strip the non-essentials. We need power for the comms array. We need to find out where we are and if there's anyone out there who isn't trying to turn us into stardust. One engineer, a young man named Leo with nervous eyes, hesitated. But what if we signal the Concordance again? Maybe they'll listen. We're not a threat. Anya's expression hardened. She grabbed a loose conduit, her knuckles white. Leo, listen to me. They erased our world. They called it peace. They see our survival as a glitch in their perfect system. To them, we're not people. We're static. Noise to be silenced. Our only value is in what we can do that they can't. And right now, that's staying hidden and staying alive. Her words hung in the recycled air, heavy with truth. The survivors exchanged grim looks. The naive hope of reconciliation died a little more. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, aboard the Concordance dreadnought, Unbroken Harmony, High Arbiter Valen reviewed the sensor logs from Sol 7. The Chroniton signature was unlike anything in the Concordance database. It resonated with something buried deep in the oldest, most restricted archives. Archives concerning the precursors, the mythical, godlike beings who had supposedly shaped the galaxy before vanishing eons ago. Archives that spoke of weapons that bent time, of civilizations that defied entropy itself and were erased for it. Valen VO to himself translated, the Terrans. They didn't just survive the cleansing fire. They harnessed it, or something within it. Keelan stood nearby, his white armor immaculate, his posture rigid with disapproval. Obsession clouds judgment. Arbiter Valen, the anomaly is dangerous, yes, but it is chaotic, unpredictable. The solution is purity, purification. We deploy the Scourge. Valen's fronds twitched. The Scourge, the Concordance's ultimate weapon against irredeemable chaos. A self-replicating nanite swarm designed to disassemble matter at the molecular level, leaving only sterile, ordered dust. It had been used only once before, on the rebellious hive world of Silos Prime. The planet was now a perfectly smooth, featureless sphere. The Scourge is indiscriminate, Kalen. It consumes all complexity. What if the Terrans hold knowledge? Knowledge the precursors left behind. Knowledge that could stabilize the Concordance against the entropy they themselves feared. Kalen, voice cold. Stability through order, Arbiter, not through the dangerous relics of chaos. The Terrans are a cancer. The Scourge is the cure. The High Synod agrees. Valen fell silent. The Synod's will was absolute. He had argued, pleaded, presented his theories about the precursor link, and been overruled. The Scourge was coming, and it would not stop until every Terran molecule was unmade. While Valen wrestled with forbidden knowledge, the Eidolon's fragile hope flickered. They'd managed a weak encrypted burst transmission. Not a plea, a probe, a question cast into the void. Is there anyone who remembers Earth? The answer came not from a friendly voice, but from a dying gasp on a long-dead frequency. A fragmented data packet, heavily corrupted, originating from the ruins of Proxima Centauri Bi, a world the Concordance had harmonized 2 centuries prior. The packet contained star charts, and a single chilling phrase repeated in a dozen dead languages: beware the silent ones. They chain the stars. More importantly, it contained coordinates to a hidden way station. A relic from the chaotic pre-Concordance era, rumored to be a haven for those who resisted assimilation. A place called Haven's Reach. Hope, fragile but real, sparked aboard the Eidolon. Vance, roused from his stupor by the coordinates, saw a chance, not just to hide, but to connect, to find others who understood the cost of the Concordance peace. Elias Vance to Anya, voice regaining some strength. Heaven's Reach? If it's real, it's our only chance. We need allies, Anya. We can't fight them alone. Anya Petrova. If it's a trap? Elias Vance. A grim smile. Then we die fighting. But if it's real, we remind the galaxy that chains can be broken. The journey to Haven's Reach was a tense crawl through treacherous nebulae and asteroid fields, constantly scanning for Concordance patrols. The Eidolon's stealth systems were minimal, its weapons non-existent. They were running on fumes and faith. They found Haven's Reach, not as a bustling station but as a graveyard. Orbiting a gas giant, the station was dark, pitted with micrometeorite scars, its docking arms hanging limp like broken bones. Sensor sweeps showed minimal power, no active transponders, but life signs. faint, scattered. Hope, it seemed, was another ghost. Anya led the boarding party, pulse rifle held tight. Her senses screaming, the air inside the station was stale, thick with the smell of ozone and decay. Flickering emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows. They found the survivors huddled in the central command hub, a motley crew of beings from a dozen different species, all bearing the hollow-eyed look of the long-hunted. Their leader was a grizzled, four-armed reptilian named Gorvax, his scales scarred, one eye replaced with a crude optical sensor. Gorvax's voice, a gravelly rasp, translated. "Terrans? By the shattered stars, you're supposed to be extinct. Enia Petrovi. So are you, apparently. We got your signal. The warning about the silent ones." Gorvax let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Signal? That wasn't a signal. That was a funeral dirge. Sent by the last of my people before the Scourge took them. Heaven's reach. It's not a haven anymore. It's a tomb waiting to be sealed," he explained. The Concordance had found them. Not with enforcers, but with something worse. The Scourge. It had consumed the outer sectors of the station weeks ago. They were trapped in the central core, the Scourge nanites held at bay only by jury-rigged EM fields that were failing by the hour. They'd sent the dirge as a final warning to any foolhardy enough to seek refuge. "Gorvax, you should have kept running, Terrans. Now you're just more ghosts for the Scourge to collect." Despair threatened to swallow the Terrans whole. They'd come seeking allies, only to find fellow prisoners awaiting execution. Vance stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the flickering EM field generator. "Elias Vance, how long?" "Gorvax, hours. Maybe less. The fields are degrading exponentially." Vance looked at Anya, then at the terrified faces of his people. He saw Leo, trembling. He saw the engineers who'd stripped the ship bare. He saw the ghost of Earth in their eyes. He made a decision. "Elias Vance, we can boost your EM fields, the Eidolon's main reactor. It's unstable, but it's got one last surge in it. We can channel it through your grid. Buy you. Maybe a day." Gorvax stared, disbelief warring with desperate hope. "Why? You don't even know us." Lelius Vance, voice low, intense. "Because the Concordance doesn't just kill worlds, Gorvax. It kills hope. And if we let them take yours, they've already won. We give you time, use it. Find a way out. Or make your last stand count." It was a suicide mission. Diverting the Eidolon's dying reactor core through the station's failing grid would likely cause a catastrophic overload, destroying both the ship and the station core. But it was the only place. As the Terrans worked feverishly, linking cables, rerouting power conduits, Anya found Vance in a quiet corridor, staring out at the gas giant. He looked exhausted, but resolute. "Enia Petrova. You're giving them our last chance, Elias." "Elias Vance. No, Anya, I'm giving them a chance. Ours is different. We showed them we're not just survivors, we're allies, even in death." He turned to her, his eyes holding a fierce light. "When the overload hits, get to the escape pods. Get the children, get everyone you can. Don't look back." Enia Petrova, tears welling, but voice steady. "And you?" "Elias Vance. I stay, to make sure the surge hits, to make sure it works." The sacrifice was set. The Terrans worked with grim efficiency, their fear channeled into purpose. Gorvax and his people watched in stunned silence, the cynical despair in their eyes slowly replaced by something else. Awe, perhaps, or the first flicker of renewed defiance. The moment came. Vance stood at the master control console in the station's core, his hands on the final activation sequence. Anya was at the escape pod bay herding the last survivors aboard. The EM fields flickered violently, the Scourge nanites visible now as a creeping silvery tide at the edge of the corridor, consuming metal and plastic with terrifying speed. Elias Vance overcomes. "Calm. Anya, tell the children. Earth was green and beautiful." Enia Petrova, voice thick. "I will, Commander." "Go." Vance slammed his fist down on the console. The Eidolon's heart gave one final glorious scream, power raw and untamed, surged through the station's grid. The EM fields flared with blinding intensity, pushing the Scourge tide back with a shriek of frustrated nanites. Lights blazed. Systems roared to life. But the strain was too much. Deep within the Eidolon, the reactor core, pushed beyond its limits, began to fracture. Alarms wailed, a human sound of pure mechanical agony. On the escape pods, Anya watched through the viewport as the station core lit up like a miniature sun, holding back the silvery death. Then, with a silent, devastating flash that momentarily outshone the gas giant, the Eidolon detonated. Not a fireball, but a wave of pure disintegrating energy that consumed the ship and rippled outwards, supercharging the EM fields one last time before collapsing in on itself. The escape pods, caught in the shockwave, were hurled violently out of orbit, tumbling into the void. Anya clung to the viewport, tears streaming down her face, watching Haven's Reach shrink behind them, its core still blazing defiantly against the encroaching Scourge. Commander Elias Vance was gone. The Eidolon was gone. But Haven's Reach held, for now, and the message was sent. Not in words, but in sacrifice. A message that echoed through the hidden networks of the galaxy's oppressed. The Terrans were back, and they fought not just for themselves, but for everyone the Concordance had chained. Weeks later, Anya and the survivors, crammed into the few escape pods, drifted near the edge of the Veil Nebula. They were low on power, low on hope. Then a signal. Not Concordance. Not Haven's Reach. A tight beam, encrypted burst on a frequency Anya recognized from pre-collapse black market channels. Enya Petrova. Reading the message, voice trembling with disbelief. Terran survivors, coordinates attached. We saw what you did at Haven's Reach. We remember Earth. We are the Free Stars Coalition. Come, fight with us. Hope, real and fierce, ignited in Anya's chest. They weren't alone. But across the galaxy, aboard the Unbroken Harmony, High Arbiter Valen received a different report. Sensor logs from the Haven's Reach incident. Analysis of the energy surge, and something else. Something buried in the residual Chroniton signature left by the Eidolon's final act. It wasn't just temporal energy. It was structured, like a key that resonated with the deepest, most forbidden archives. He accessed the precursor vault, bypassing layers of security with codes he shouldn't have possessed. What he found froze his chitinous blood. Not just theories, proof, star charts, weapon schematics, and a single chilling entry, translated from the precursor glyphs. Subject Terran species, Homo sapiens, designation Omega Vector. Purpose, final contingency against entropic collapse. Capabilities adaptive resilience, extreme, temporal manipulation, latent, collective will unquantifiable, status, seeded, dormant, do not awaken prematurely. Valen stared at the words, the implications crashing over him like a tidal wave. Humanity wasn't just a chaotic anomaly. They were a weapon designed by the godlike precursors to fight an enemy so vast, so terrible that even the precursors had vanished rather than face it. An enemy the Concordance, in its serene arrogance, had mistaken for mere chaos and tried to erase. Velen, VO, voice a horrified whisper. We didn't just wake a nightmare, Kalen. He looked up, his fronds rigid with terror, his armor a sickly, pulsating black. We woke the galaxy's last hope and pointed the Scourge directly at it. The devastating revelation struck like a physical blow. The Concordance hadn't been policing chaos. They'd been guarding a tomb, and in their blind pursuit of order, they'd shattered the seal. The true enemy was coming, and humanity, the weapon they'd tried to destroy, was the only thing standing between the galaxy and utter annihilation. The Free Stars Coalition wasn't an army. It was a whisper. A network of smugglers, rebels, and refugees, hiding in the galaxy's forgotten corners. But whispers, when they carry the truth, can become roars, and the truth Anya Petrova brought. The truth of Haven's Reach, the truth of humanity's sacrifice, ignited a firestorm. The Coalition base was a hollowed-out asteroid in the turbulent accretion disk of a black hole. a place the Concordance's ordered sensors deemed too chaotic to monitor. Inside, amidst the clang of makeshift workshops and the hum of jury-rigged reactors, a new kind of war was being forged, not with the Concordance's sterile precision, but with human ingenuity, alien desperation, and the raw, unyielding spirit of those who refused to be chained. Anya Petrova, no longer just an engineer, stood before a holographic star map, her face etched with the lines of command and loss, but her eyes burning with a fierce light. Around her stood Gorvax, his people bolstered by the Terran survivors, a wiry, avian strategist named Kalira, and a dozen other leaders of the oppressed. They called her the Phoenix, not for her own resurrection, but for the fire she carried. The fire of Earth. Anya Petrova, pointing to a cluster of stars. The Concordance is moving the Scourge fleet, not just to hunt us. They're converging on the core worlds. Valen's last transmission. It wasn't a threat, it was a warning. Something's coming. Something the Concordance is terrified of. Kalira tilted her feathered head, her beak clicking thoughtfully. The Arbiter Valen, he's Concordance. Why would he warn us? Anya Petrova. Because he finally saw the truth. The Concordance didn't create order. They built a cage. And the thing outside the cage is waking up. She revealed the fragmented precursor data she'd managed to salvage from the Eidolon's final logs. The Omega Vector designation, the mention of entropic collapse. It was terrifying, but it was also a key. If humanity was the weapon, then their unique biology, their chaotic resilience, their latent connection to temporal energy, it wasn't a flaw, it was the trigger. The plan was audacious, suicidal. They wouldn't hide, they wouldn't run. They would strike at the heart of the Concordance's power. The Nexus Prime, the central processing hub where all Concordance data, all control signals, all the chains of order were forged, and they would use the one thing the Concordance couldn't comprehend: human chaos. While the Coalition prepared, High Arbiter Valen faced the High Synod. He stood alone in the vast crystalline chamber of the Nexus Prime, the very heart of Concordance order. The Synod members, towering figures of pure light and geometric perfection, regarded him with cold, dispassionate judgment. High Synod, VO, a chorus of synthesized voices. Your deviation is noted, Arbiter Valen. Your obsession with the Terran anomaly has compromised your function. The Scourge deployment proceeds. The anomaly will be purified. Valen, VO, voice strained but defiant. You are purifying the galaxy's only defense. The entropic entity. It is not chaos. It is anti-existence. It consumes reality itself. The Terrans, they are the precursor's failsafe. Destroy them, and you doom us all. High Senate. The precursors are myth. Order is reality. Your logic is corrupted by emotional resonance with the anomaly. You are relieved of command. The Scourge fleet is under Arbiter Kalen's authority. Kalen stepped forward from the shadows, his white armor gleaming, his fronds held in perfect rigid alignment. His eyes, visible for the first time through his visor, were cold, dark pits of absolute certainty. Kalen Visio. The anomaly ends today. Valen. Order will be restored. Valen was escorted away, not to a cell but to an observation blister overlooking the Nexus Prime's main data conduit, a river of pure, ordered light flowing through the heart of the station. He was to witness the final purification. A lesson in the cost of doubt. As Valen watched the ordered light flow, a different kind of storm was gathering at the edge of Concordance space. The Free Stars Coalition fleet was a ragged assembly of salvaged freighters, retrofitted fighters, and the few surviving Terran escape pods, now bristling with scavenged weapons. At its heart was the Phoenix's Pyre, a captured Concordance patrol frigate, its pristine lines scarred by human hands, its systems jury-rigged to channel the one weapon they had left, the collective will of the survivors. Anya stood on the bridge of the Phoenix's Pyre, Leo at her side, now hardened by loss, his hands steady on the helm. Korvax manned the weapons, his scarred face set in a grim line. They knew the odds. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. The Concordance defenses around Nexus Prime were impenetrable, but they had one advantage. The Concordance couldn't predict chaos. N.I. Petrova, over fleet comms. Voice calm. Carrying. Remember Haven's reach. Remember Earth. They think we're just noise. Let's show them what noise can do. The attack began not with a charge, but with a distortion. The coalition ships, guided by Anya's understanding of the Eidolon's Chroniton principles, didn't fly through space. They flew between its moments. They phased in and out of reality, appearing suddenly to unleash a barrage of plasma fire on a sensor array, then vanishing before the Concordance defenses could lock on. It was messy, unpredictable, terrifyingly effective. Concordance enforcers fired at phantoms, their perfect targeting algorithms confounded by temporal static. The galaxy's perfect order began to fray at the edges. Inside Nexus Prime, alarms blared, a harsh, discordant sound utterly alien to the station's usual serene hum. Kalen stood on the command deck, his certainty cracking. Impossible. Their tactics, they defy causality. On the observation blister, Baeline watched the chaotic dance on the external monitors. He saw the Terran frigate, the Phoenix's pyre weaving through the defensive grid like a needle through silk. He saw the raw, desperate courage in their movements, and he understood they weren't just feeding the Concordance. They were fighting for it, fighting to save the galaxy the Concordance had unwittingly doomed. Valen, Veo, a desperate realization. They're not the weapon, they're the key. The key to unlock the precursor failsafe, which is here. His eyes snapped to the data conduit flowing past his blister. The river of light. The heart of Concord's control. The precursor archives had mentioned a harmonic resonance chamber at the core of the Nexus, designed to amplify the Omega Vector's signal. The Concordance had built their throne on the very weapon they feared. The final gambit wasn't to destroy the Nexus. It was to awaken it. Anya's voice crackled over a tight beam channel, miraculously penetrating the Nexus's shields, a channel Valen in his despair had left open, a final act of silent rebellion. Anya Petrova. Arbiter Valen? We know. The resonance chamber. We need to flood it with human biosignatures. With our chaos. Can you open the conduit? The Sanlan looked at the river of light. To open it would be treason. It would flood the Nexus core with uncontrolled chaotic energy. It could destroy everything. Or it could save everything. He saw Kalen on the command deck, ordering the Scourge fleet to converge on the Phoenix's pyre, ready to erase the last spark of hope. He saw the faces of the Terran survivors on the monitors, fighting with everything they had. He remembered the archival scream from Sol, "We will be the ember in the dark." Valen. Valo. Voice filled with sudden terrifying resolve. For the galaxy. Forgive me. With a surge of will that overrode his conditioning. Valen slammed his chitinous hand onto the emergency override panel in the blister. Not to close the conduit. To divert it. To open a direct channel from the observation blister straight into the heart of the harmonic resonance chamber. Alarms shrieked to a new panicked pitch. On the command deck, Kalen whirled, "Valen, what have you done?" But it was too late. The Phoenix's pyre, taking massive damage, its hull breached, its engines failing, made its final desperate run. Guided by Valen's diversion, it plunged not into the station's armor, but into the open maw of the diverted data conduit. The ghost ship flew into the heart of the machine. Inside the Phoenix's pyre, Anya stood at the main console, Leo beside her. They weren't piloting, they were broadcasting. Every survivor on the ship, every human biosignature, every pulse of their chaotic, resilient life force was channeled through the ship's systems, amplified by the dying Chroniton echoes in its hull and poured directly into the Nexus Prime's core. Anya Petrova, shouting over the groaning metal the shriek of tearing reality. For Earth. For every world they chained, let it burn. The effect was instantaneous and cataclysmic. The river of ordered light in the conduit exploded with chaotic energy. Human biosignatures, fear, hope, rage, love, the messy, beautiful chaos of uncontrolled life, flooded the harmonic resonance chamber. The chamber, designed by the precursors to resonate with the Omega Vector, awoke. Nexus Prime didn't explode. It sang. A deep, resonant frequency, felt rather than heard, pulsed outwards from the station. It washed over the Concordance fleet, over the Scourge nanites, over the entire core worlds. The effect was transformation. The Scourge nanites, designed to unmake complexity, encountered a complexity they couldn't process. The sheer, overwhelming aliveness of the human signal amplified by the chamber. They didn't disassemble. They stuttered. Then, impossibly, they began to rebuild, not into sterile dust but into intricate, beautiful crystalline structures, reflecting the chaotic patterns of human thought. Concordance enforcers, their systems built on absolute order, experienced a cascade failure, not of hardware, but of purpose. The rigid logic that defined them was flooded with empathy, with doubt, with the terrifying, beautiful concept of choice. Their weapons powered down, their formation dissolved. On the command deck, Kalen screamed as his perfect certainty shattered. He saw not enemies, but people. He saw the faces of the Terrans not as anomalies, but as reflections of a potential he'd never dared imagine. His white armor flickered, then shifted through a chaotic kaleidoscope of colors before settling on a deep, uncertain gray. He collapsed to his knees, not in defeat, but in overwhelming, terrifying awakening. The chains didn't break. They dissolved, replaced not by chaos, but by something new, something free. The wave of resonance spread outwards, faster than light, touching every world, every being connected to the Concordance network. Across the galaxy, beings who had lived for centuries in serene, emotionless order felt the first stirrings of passion, of doubt, of individual will. The perfect peace of the grave was shattered, not by war, but by life. On the observation blister, Valen watched the transformation unfold on the monitors. He saw the Scourge bloom into gardens of light. He saw enforcers drift, their predatory forms softened by confusion and wonder. He saw Kalen, broken but alive, and he felt it himself, a warmth in his chitinous chest, a sense of possibility. He had sacrificed order for chaos, and found something infinitely more valuable. The Phoenix's pyre was gone, consumed by the resonance. Ania Petrova, Leo, Gorvax. They were gone, but their signal remained, a permanent echo in the galaxy's fabric. The ember had become a sun. Humanity died once, on a world called Earth, under a cleansing fire meant to erase them from history. But death for humanity was never the end. It was the forge, and from those ashes they rose, not to conquer, but to shatter the chains that bound every star, every soul to a silent, sterile peace. They reminded the galaxy that true order isn't the absence of chaos, but the courage to embrace the beautiful, terrifying, unbreakable spark of life itself. High Arbiter Valen, no longer an arbiter, stood alone in the silent observation blister. The river of light below now flowed with streaks of vibrant, chaotic color. He placed a hand against the cool transparisteel, looking out at the transformed fleet, at the galaxy awakening from its long, ordered sleep. A single human phrase, learned from the archival fragments, echoed in his mind. Not a scream of defiance this time, a whisper of hope. We are here. And for the first time in 10,000 cycles, the galaxy listened.